Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be diving into something pretty cool, the connection between physical activity and how our kids learn, or in other words, how moving those little bodies can actually impact cognitive
I
development.
know, right?
We're going to be looking at a chapter from this book, Physical Education and Wellbeing, and I think you'll be surprised by just how powerful moving can be when it comes to learning.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the research is really remarkable.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that our brains, even though our bodies might slow down a bit as we age, our brains actually stay sharp.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they can even get sharper over time, particularly when it comes to making those new connections.
So you're saying even though, things might get a little creakier physically, our brains can keep getting better.
That's exactly it.
I'm guessing this has something to do with that plasticity concept the book mentions.
You got it. Brain plasticity is like this incredible ability our brains have to adapt and change throughout our lives.
Hmm.
It's like our brains are constantly rewiring themselves based on, what we experience.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful ways we can stimulate that rewiring, especially in those crucial early years, is through movement.
So you're saying it's not just about getting kids up and moving, it's the type of movement that can really make a difference when it comes to brain development.
Exactly. The research highlighted activities that challenge coordination balance and spatial reasoning.
Hmm.
Things like obstacle courses, dance, even just playing tag.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense.
These types of activities, they really make the brain work in these complex ways, forcing those neurons to fire and make new connections.
That makes total sense. There's this one quote from Rothstein, one of the researchers mentioned in the chapter that I thought was pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah?
He said, "Children need exercise to learn. Scientists say it is plausible that by promoting blood flow to the brain, physical activity increases cognitive power."
I love that quote.
It's like movement is literally fueling the brain.
It really is. And it's not just about this overall boost in brain power. The research actually goes deeper and points to specific cognitive functions that see improvements from physical activity, like attention, memory, concentration, even spatial perception.
Okay, so that's amazing. We've got the science on how movement impacts brain development, but what does this actually mean for learning, in the classroom?
Right. Well, that's where the connection to real-world learning gets really interesting. I mean,
Okay.
think about it. Improved attention means kids can focus better in class.
Right.
Stronger memory helps them retain information. All those benefits directly translate to academic success.
I see. The chapter also mentions this information processing model, which I gotta admit sounds a little technical.
Yeah. It's basically a model of how we learn.
Yeah.
Think of it as a brain taking in information, processing it, and then storing it for later use.
Okay.
And the key here is that the quality of that processing is impacted by things like clear instructions, good demonstrations, and helpful feedback.
So it's like a good teacher isn't just delivering information, they're actually guiding how those neural connections are made.
Precisely. And the chapter suggests that this is especially crucial in physical education. It's not enough to just let kids run around.
Oh, so PE is more than just recess.
Exactly. Teachers who understand this model can actually structure activities in a way that maximizes learning.
That is a really good point. It's not just about movement, it's about how that movement is structured and guided. Now, I'm curious about another concept the chapter talks about, metacognition.
Ah, yes. Thinking about thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How does that fit into all of this?
Well, metacognition is like having this inner coach. It's about being aware of your own thought processes and learning how to learn. It's about self-regulation, responsibility, and persistence.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really fascinating is the source suggests that physical education can actually be a training ground for these metacognitive skills.
You mean because when you're learning a new sport or a new physical skill, you have to think about your technique,
Hmm.
adjust your approach, stay motivated even when it gets tough.
Exactly. Think about the discipline it takes to master a sport. Those same mental muscles are what you need to succeed academically.
So we're not just talking about physical benefits here. We're talking about skills that can help kids thrive in all areas of life. And the research really seems to back this up. The chapter mentions several studies where increasing PE time actually led to better academic performance.
Right. There's the Van Ves study, the Troy-Riviere study, and the Hindmarsh study. They all found that in some cases, students with more PE actually did better academically.
That seems kind of counterintuitive, though, right? We tend to think that more time on academics always leads to better results.
I know, it's surprising, isn't it? But that's the really fascinating takeaway here. A balanced approach, one that incorporates physical activity, might be the real key to unlocking learning potential. We need to rethink those old assumptions.
So what you're saying is movement isn't just beneficial, it might actually be essential for maximizing learning.
That's what the research suggests.
That's incredible. And the chapter doesn't stop there. It even mentions a study by Jorgensen in 2013 that found a link between swimming and improvements in literacy, numeracy, and other cognitive skills.
And there's another really interesting point here. The source cites research by Foran and colleagues from 2017 that suggests incorporating movement throughout the school day, not just in designated PE periods, could have significant benefits.
So maybe those classroom wiggle breaks aren't just about kids' sanity after all.
Exactly. Maybe they're giving those little brains a much-needed boost.
That's pretty amazing. So it sounds like movement is a key ingredient in learning both within PE class and beyond. And that raises a really important question. If movement is that important for learning, how can we be more intentional about bringing it into our children's lives, both at school and at home?
It's a great question, and one we'll definitely explore further as we continue this deep dive. But before we do, let's take a closer look at how this connection between movement and learning plays out in the social and emotional realms. Because after all, learning isn't just about academics, it's about the whole child.
Right. It's about the whole child.
It's true. Learning isn't just about, cramming all those facts and figures.
Right.
It's about developing the whole child. And what's interesting is that this research, it really highlights how interconnected those physical, cognitive, and social emotional aspects of development really are.
So where do emotions fit into all of this? I mean, we are talking about kids after all. Their feelings are going to play a huge role in how they experience everything.
Absolutely. The chapter actually addresses that. It brings up how recent brain research really just confirms that emotions play such a powerful role in learning. They can either help or hinder the process, depending on whether those emotions are positive or negative.
So you're saying a stressed out kid, a child who's feeling anxious is going to have a much harder time learning than a kid who feels, safe and supported?
Exactly. It's about creating that learning environment that isn't just, physically stimulating, but also emotionally nurturing. A place where kids feel comfortable, safe to take risks, to make mistakes, and ultimately learn from those experiences.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. The chapter also mentions something called learning values or universal competencies. What are those all about?
Think of them as these essential life skills, those things that go beyond just academics. So things like self-regulation, responsibility, persistence, empathy, respect. These are the qualities that really help kids thrive in all areas of life, not just in the classroom. And guess what? Physical education can be this incredibly powerful tool for developing these values.
Because on a sports field or in a, dance class, you have to learn to cooperate, you have to learn to communicate, set goals, deal with setbacks, and respect your teammates, even your opponents.
Exactly. In many ways, physical activity, it provides this microcosm of the real world.
Yeah.
Kids actually get to practice those essential life skills, but in a safe and structured environment.
So we've talked about how physical activity benefits, those mental processes we call cognition, and we've seen how it can foster that emotional well-being, those essential life skills. But what about the social side of things? Does the chapter touch on that at all?
It does. Remember we talked about brain plasticity earlier and how it actually increases with age?
Right.
Well, the source goes on to explain that development, that plasticity is actually enhanced by social interaction.
Yeah.
It even cites a researcher named Rogoff who argues that cognitive development, it actually happens best in social settings where kids are actively engaged with their peers.
So learning isn't just about, sitting alone in your room studying. It's about being with others, bouncing ideas off each other and working together.
Precisely. And physical education, it just offers so many opportunities for that kind of social learning. Think about it, team sports, group games, even a dance class. All those activities require kids to communicate, to cooperate, negotiate, problem solve together.
Right.
They're developing all those essential social skills while also reaping the cognitive benefits.
So it's not just about moving our bodies, it's about moving with others.
You got it.
Right.
And there's actual research that backs up this whole idea. The chapter highlights findings from a study by Lynch published in 2015, and it suggests that physical education is actually most effective when you have this collaboration between teachers, both specialists and classroom teachers working together.
So it can't just be the PE teacher's responsibility. If we really want to create that culture of movement throughout the school, it needs to be integrated into all parts of the school day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about breaking down those artificial barriers between physical activity and learning,
Yeah.
recognizing that they're really just fundamentally interconnected.
The chapter actually highlights this one qualitative study where teachers even suggested that PE should be like infused into the classroom throughout the whole day and not just, separated into PE classes.
I like that. It's about finding those creative ways to weave movement into all aspects of the learning experience. Maybe it's having kids do some stretches or yoga poses before a test, or incorporating movement into a history lesson by acting out a battle
Oh,
scene.
I love that.
I mean, the possibilities are endless, really.
It seems like we're moving towards this, more holistic view of education, one that recognizes the importance of movement and social interaction and emotional well-being, alongside those more traditional academics.
Right. It's about understanding that children are complex and their development is multifaceted. We need to nurture all aspects of their growth, not just,
Yeah.
zero in on their academic performance.
Absolutely. To kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, the chapter actually offers some insightful reflections and questions for us all to consider. It asks us to think about how we can use, learning to learn and reflections, self-regulation, responsibility, and persistence to really enhance learning both for ourselves and for the children, in our lives.
Right.
And it challenges us to think about how physical activities can be used to enhance cognitive power.
It's really a call to action. It's inviting us to become those researchers, in our own right, to observe, gather evidence, and see how these principles actually play out in our own environments.
So we've seen how movement can impact learning in children, not just physically, but socially and emotionally. But what about us adults? Do these findings apply to our learning and well-being? That's something to think about as we head into the final part of this deep dive. It's fun, we often think of physical activity as something we do just for our bodies, to stay in shape or lose a few pounds.
Yeah.
But this whole deep dive has really kind of made me rethink things.
In what way?
It's really opened my eyes to how much movement impacts our minds too. And not just, when we're kids, but like throughout our entire lives.
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest takeaways from all this research. The idea that brain plasticity doesn't just stop when we reach a certain age.
Right.
Our brains are always rewiring and adapting based on what we experience, even as they get older. And physical activity can play a huge role in keeping those brains, healthy and sharp.
So you're saying those afternoon walks aren't just good for my heart, they're actually giving my brain a boost as well.
You got it. There's a ton of research coming out now showing that physical activity can really improve cognitive function in adults. Things like memory, attention, processing speed, even creativity.
Wow. I'm already rethinking that afternoon slump I get at work.
Yeah.
Usually I reach for another cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But maybe what I really need is to get up and move around a bit.
It's definitely worth trying. Sometimes a quick walk or even a few minutes of stretching can be way more effective than caffeine when it comes to re-energizing your brain.
I'm already brainstorming ways to get more movement into my workday. Maybe I'll even come up with my next podcast episode while I'm out for a walk.
Uh-huh. There you go.
Yeah.
See, that's the beauty of these deep dives. It's not just about, taking in all this information. It's about actually using what we learn in our own lives.
So true. It's about being more aware of that mind-body connection and making choices that support, both.
Right. It's about recognizing that movement isn't just a means to an end. It's a fundamental part of living a good life, a healthy, fulfilling life, one that supports our physical, cognitive, and emotional well-being.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a final question to think about. If movement really is the key to unlocking our learning potential at any age, what are some creative ways that we can all bring more movement into our daily lives?
That's the challenge, right? And it's important to remember it's not just about, hitting the gym or running a marathon. It's about those little everyday choices that can add up to make a big difference.
Right.
Taking the stairs instead of the elevator walking, or biking to work, having a little dance break in the middle of the day,
It's about making movement a part of our daily routine no matter how busy things get.
Exactly.
Right.
And most importantly, find activities you actually enjoy, things that bring you joy. And that way it won't feel like another chore, It'll be something you actually look forward to.
Right.
And believe me, your brain and your body will thank you for it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We hope you learned a thing or two and that you're feeling inspired to get up and move. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep moving.